Good evening, welcome back. Last test in the League of DHARMA IAS Political Science Test Series UPSC Mains 2025. Till now we have completed 5 tests. This is last test 6 paper second. Okay. Quickly questions. Question number 1. Write a brief note on the system's approach to the IR. Then second one is United Nations Human Rights Council. Third one is critically examine the value of APEC at a time of growing international turmoil. Examine the changing nature of security in the recent times. Critically examine the democratic peace thesis. 2A, define geopolitics and account for its prevalence even in the modern nuclear age. 2B, UNFCCC and other United Nations efforts to address global environmental crisis. 2C, why sovereignty regarded as the core feature of the state? Is the notion of post-sovereign governance meaningful? Then discuss, is the tension between states' rights and human rights irresolvable? Do Asian values merely serve as an excuse for authoritarian rule? 3B, discuss the significance and urgency of the United Nations Security Council reforms. 3C, explain the political sociological approach and limitations. 4A, do you agree with the notion that Marxist approach to the study of IR is largely based on economic reductionism? What implications do feminists draw from the gendered character of nation and states? 4B. 4C, the world order is in flux. Multipolarity based on equitable principles is needed. Comment. This is section A. Section B. 1B. 5A, discuss the nature and types of determinants of India's foreign policy. Nature and determinants. What, according to your understanding, is the best option that India should take on the Indus Waters Treaty, IWT? Discuss in the context of India's decision to place the IWT in abeyance. Write a brief note on India's interest in West Asia, India, Nepal, then importance of India-Israel ties, then 6A SARC, 6B on India's role in UN peacekeeping and UNSC reforms, 6C India-Russia, 7A CTBT and NPT and India's stance on that, non-alignment, 7B, and 7C is neighborhood, South Asia and India, 8A on India-US relationship since 2000, 8B, no first use policy and any reforms required. And last, 8C, critically examine the role of India in shaping the emerging world order. So these are the questions we are going to discuss in next 2 hours. Okay. So now we'll start. Quick. Okay, so question number 1A, write a brief note on the system's approach to the study of international relations. Okay, so 10 marker, you can directly start with systems approach to the IR. Understand? Systems approach to IR is different than systems approach to comparative politics. Of course, this was also influenced by the behavioralism or scientific methods. But in IR, there are different people, different scholars, they use systems approach to study the international relations. Technically, David Easton's approach focused more on domestic politics and their comparison with other countries' political system. That is the systems approach of David Easton. But it is Morton Kaplan in 1957 used this systems approach to study the international international relations in his famous book System and Process in International Politics. System and Process in International Politics. Okay, so rather than studying countries in the international relations separately, he argued for the fold or system in the international relations. Based on that, he gave different models. Initially 6 models, later on he added 4 new models to that, total 10 models, but 6 models to study the international relations that you can mention: balance of power, then bipolarity, loose bipolarity, tight bipolarity, okay, hierarchical order, unit veto system. All those models he gave to study the international relations that you can mention Morton Kaplan's. He was also criticized by scholars, that is, it is unnecessary step in right direction, or it was very technical, it failed to give other models, other developments in the world, social movements, or other new changes in the might come in the system or international relations, as it is based on science, but it is predicting the model. That is also criticized by the scholar. It is not scientific, it is just theoretical explanation, it is not theory as itself. Likewise, it was criticized, but it was not Morton Kaplan only. Other scholars also gave the systems theory or use systems approach in international relations, like Kenneth Walls also used this to give his neorealism under the influence of behavioralism. Then even Joseph Nye also used this concept to describe complex interdependence, and even Immanuel Wallerstein also used this concept systems to give his world systems theory. So you can mention those briefly, but focus more on Morton Kaplan. Okay, that is required. Other are there, but it is Morton Kaplan who popularized this model. Okay, Alexander Wendt, Joseph Nye, Kenneth Walls, even Immanuel Wallerstein. You can mention briefly all these people. Okay, that is right. Brief note on systems approach to the study of international relations. The next one is evaluate the role played by the United Nations Human Rights Council in upholding human rights. United Nations Human Rights Councils established 2006, members 47. Okay, you can mention that. Universal Periodic Review in the context of human rights violation, that is, you can mention that. Okay. In the recent past, United Nations Human Rights Council, along with Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights, they work for the issues like genocide and all that in the context of in Myanmar, in the context of Rohingyas. UNHRC and Office of Human Rights Commissioner condemned the state and termed it ethnic cleansing. So likewise, in some areas, this United Nations Human Rights Council has worked, but this body also criticized by many because of its nature. Many times, the people or the countries who are regularly violating the human rights are the part of this body. That is elections, through elections. That is also criticized. Like Russia was part of United Nations Human Rights Council, and we all know that Russia has various committed various atrocities in Ukraine and all that. So that's why this Human Rights Council was criticized. Even Ban Ki-moon also argued that it is non-effective. United Nations Human Rights Council, it is non-effective. Okay. You can mention that. Next one is 1C, critically examine the value of OPEC at a time of growing international turmoil. Okay, OPEC, it is open regionalism, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, established in 1989, 21 economies, all know that, economies are there, okay, Taiwan and all that, Hong Kong, and it is open regionalism, that is, decisions are not binding, voluntary, okay, So that is the feature of APEC. In the context of growing international turmoil means trade war issues, geopolitics like Israel or Indo-Pacific, China, USA rivalry, or Russia-Ukraine war. In that context, APEC can play an important role. We can argue, but it has also limitations. That is, again, as I said, it is decisions are voluntary, very, we can say, decisions are not binding on the members. They can choose their own decisions. So that's why APEC has limitations. You can mention. And country like India is not part of this body. That is also limitation, because though technically India was not part of this calculation, APEC calculation initially, but right now terminology has changed from APEC or Asia Pacific to Indo Pacific. India wants to be part of that APEC, but because of Chinese pressure, we are not part of that APEC. You can mention that. Fine. Then examine the changing nature of security in the recent times. Security, yesterday we have discussed one topic on security. Okay, you can continue with that topic. Conventional understanding of security, realist scholars and liberals. Okay, for realist, security is territorial security. Territorial security. You can mention Morgenthau, Kenneth Waltz, security maximizers, according to neo-realism. Liberals also talks about economic security, territorial security, etc. But their approach is different. That is conventional understanding of security. But in the recent past, feminists have argued about human security. That part you can mention. Cynthia in Love, Anne J. Tickner, you can mention feminist scholar. That is the only point in this topic. Next, critically examine the democratic peace theory. Again, very simple. Michael Doyle in 1980s, around 88, gave this theory. That is, true democracies avoid war. That is his thesis. And he was influenced by Immanuel Kant, Woodrow Wilson, idealist scholars. And he argued that because of public pressure, media, free and fair elections, freedom of speech, the democratic polities avoid war. He gives example of Europe and all that. But this is again not true universally. We can argue that pressure is there on the leaders, but it is not true that only just because democratic setup is there, countries avoid war. No. There are multiple reasons in the context of war. Okay. No country wants to be in a war, but because of circumstances, it has to take decisions. Okay. So just because we have democracy, that does not mean that there will not be any war. Many times democratic countries also launched wars. And even this doctrine was used by or misused by George Bush during 2003 invasion on Iraq. Okay, and in the Middle East, intervention in the Middle East, or to promote democracy on gunpoint in Libya, Yemen, Egypt, and right now we have failed states. So this theory was again criticized, democratic peace theory. Fine. Then next question, do we define geopolitics? Define geopolitics and account for its prevalence even in the modern nuclear age. Even in the modern nuclear age. Fine. Geopolitics, very simple. Start with definition directly. Simple. Geography, interface between geography and politics in the international relations. Geography and politics, impact of geography and politics on each other. Okay, you can mention Napoleon Bonaparte. Geography is the most important determinants of foreign policy for any country, size and location. That is geopolitics. And historically, geopolitics has played important role in the wars and etc. World War First, Second, and all that. Geoeconomics along with geopolitics. But in the context of nuclear age, people were saying that nuclear powers or nuclear deterrence has, we can say, stop the wars, like Kenneth Wars, nuclear deterrence, and etc. Despite having nuclears, countries are having wars. Why? Because still geopolitics matters. Geopolitics matters because of various reasons. Correct? Most important is resources, natural resources. Second one is communications. Communication. Okay. Third one is location. Fourth, population, security, and all that. So because of that, geopolitics matter. For example, you can give the example of why Russia took Crimea in 2014, annexed Crimea, because Russia has insecurity in the context of Black Sea. Okay, it wants to have connectivity with Mediterranean Sea through Black Sea, and Crimea has strategic location. So in 2014, Russia annexed that. Right now, it is in the control of Russia. That is geopolitics. That is geopolitics. Again, Russia invaded Ukraine because of Ukraine is considered as buffer state between Europe and Russia. Russia is not happy with Ukraine's membership in NATO. Okay, so that's why Russia invaded Ukraine. That is geopolitics once again. Geopolitics. China's rising influence or aggression in South China Sea is also geopolitics, and rising importance of South China Sea because of resources and all that. Malacca Strait, okay, China's string of pearls, all those points reflect the importance of geopolitics even in the modern nuclear age. Okay, you can mention Israel and Syria war also, Golan Heights, because of control in the context of Golan Heights. In the recent past, there has been issues, even Israel attacked that part. So that is the importance of geopolitics. Irrespective of this complex interdependence, liberalism and all that, geopolitics is important. Realist school. Understood? You can mention scholars, realist scholars, Mearsheimer, all those people you can mention to justify your answer. Next one is UNFCCC. Critically examine the role of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. United Nations Framework on Climate Change, UNFCCC, and other efforts by the UN to address the global environmental crisis. So from 1992 onwards, we have various initiatives by the UN to address the climate change, greenhouse gas emissions. Kyoto Protocol, Kyoto 1997, Paris Bill 2015, okay, Green Climate Fund. All those initiatives were taken by the United Nations. Okay, COP29 was there in 2024. Azerbaijan, you can mention. Every year, UNFCCC has been having some summits or COP, Conference of Parties, different. Till date, we have 29. Last one was 2024. Bapu, you can mention that. Now, look, question is asking critically examine. So you can mention all those efforts of the countries and UNFCCC and the UN. Even you can mention International Court of Justice recent judgment, 2025 judgment, July. Okay. Countries must take actions to restrict climate change, arrest climate change. That is advisory jurisdiction or advisory opinion given by the International Court of Justice, though it has no binding force, but it is moral. It has moral force. So all these efforts show in United Nations bodies are serious about the climate change. You can mention SDGs also, Sustainable Development Goals related to climate change. One of the goal is also climate change. But efforts are there, but on ground issues are there, limitations are there. Implementation, issue of implementation, will, political will, is not there. Divided, developed versus developing countries, that issue is still there. Okay, even that climate fund or green climate fund issue or climate financing, that is again issue. Though developed countries agreed to finance developing world in the context of loss and damage, but that again not happen on ground, and developed countries are arguing that developing world must take concrete steps along with developed, but that issue is still there. So you can mention critically examine limitations. Fine, that is UNFCCC and other. Mention just right now International Court of Justice advisory opinion in your answer. Next one is, why is sovereignty regarded as the core feature of the state? Sovereignty is regarded as the core feature of the state. Is the notion of post-sovereign governance meaningful? First, address this sovereignty. Treaty of Westphalia, 1648, nation states, okay, provided peace in Europe for long. Once again got challenged by the Napoleon wars, but realist school established this principle, sovereignty principle, as the most important principle in the international politics or international relations, because sovereign powers are required to take decisions within domestic sphere and external sphere also, to protect their national interest. You can mention Morgenthau and other people. And all international organizations like League of Nations or United Nations are based on this principle, to protect, respect sovereignty of each other. Okay, so that's why sovereignty regarded as the core feature of the state. Okay, so if this is also primary national interest according to Morgenthau, okay, it is permanent national interest. No country can compromise on that sovereignty. For every country, that sovereignty is important. Okay, that is the core. That is core national interest. Without that, there will not be any independence, and that's why even third world countries also launch non-alignment movement just to maintain that sovereign power in the foreign policy making. So that is the importance of sovereign state or sovereignty as the core feature of the state. You can mention all those points. But in the context of complex interdependence and rising non-state actors and supranational bodies like European Union, this concept, modern concept sovereignty, came under the challenge. And there is debate that the notion of post-sovereign governance is possible. To the extent that is also correct. To the extent we have some examples like, as I said, European Union, that is supranational bodies. Then we have non-state actors. They are playing very important role in the international politics, NGOs, MNCs, etc. Okay, so certainly that is possible. Post-sovereign governance, that is meaningful, but you can mention realist wala ki still state sovereignty is important or intact. Still states are the prime decision making body in the international politics. Once again you can mention trade wars and all that. Okay, protectionist measures of the developed world also, like United States of America. So you can mention that. Right? Next question. 3A, is the tension between states' rights and human rights irresolvable? Okay. Solvable, irresolvable. Is the tension between states' rights and human rights irresolvable? Do Asian values merely serve as an excuse for authoritarian rule? Now, question is asking, do you think that there is an issue between states' rights and human rights, and these issues cannot be resolved? Fine. So certainly, in the context of rising notion of human rights doctrine, there is challenge on the state's decision making or rights. Okay. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right to responsibility to protect and all that. All those features you can mention: collective security, responsibility to protect, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all UN bodies like United Nations Human Rights Council, Office for Human Rights uh, Protection and all that. But that is not true. It is not resolvable, or it is rigid. Okay, if there is proper balance, or there is communication, or states actions, mature states action, freedom, media, a democratic setup, certainly this can be possible. Okay, it's not like that all the time there is conflict between the states' rights and the human rights. Okay, that is not the issue, but it requires, of course, maturity, democratic setup that you can mention. You can bring that Asian values here, correct? Mahathir Mohamad and Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore, to mention this issue. That is again debatable issue. Community rights versus states' rights or individual rights, that you can mention. That is the second part only. Do Asian values merely serve as an excuse for authoritarian rule? This is also debatable. Asian values versus authoritarianism. Asian values are nothing but community oriented rights, more focus on duty over rights, collective good, promoted by the scholars or leaders like Mahathir Mohamad and Lee Kuan Yew in the context of ASEAN or in the Southeast Asia or generally ASEAN. Fine. Asian values. Now, some people or the Western scholars, especially or even in India also, Amartya Sen, argue that these Asian values are just mask to protect authoritarian rule, to save authoritarian regimes, because Asian values, they do not take into consideration issues of women, gender, and cultural issues in the context of discrimination within the cultures. So, feminist and social liberal like Amartya Sen, they have criticized Asian values as merely excuse for authoritarian rule like Malaysia, Singapore, China. That is one way to look towards this particular issue. But you can conclude on the line that we have some economic success in the countries like Malaysia, Singapore, and China. Though we cannot, copy those models, but even Amartya Sen has also admired Chinese, efforts, in the sense that China has brought more than 40 crore people out of poverty. That is open secret. Jagdish Bhagwati and all the people, they have argued that China has certainly pulled out more than 40 crore people out of poverty. But of course, Amartya Sen, he believes that that model cannot be utilized everywhere. He prefers Kerala model, that is democratic model. But you can mention that this Asian values, it has some success also, and you can conclude with democratic setup. Fine. Then discuss the significance and urgency of the United Nations Security Council reforms. Discuss significance and urgency. What is significance of UNSC? First, give the background of UNSC. Okay. Most important organ of the United Nations. 15 members, 5 plus 10, with veto power and all that. Post World War II body, so it does not reflect it. It is not democratic right now, because post World War situation was different. World War II situation was different. Right now situation is different. So there is need to reform this body, and all the powers, United Nations, major decisions are controlled by the UNSC. Okay, without UNSC, nothing can happen at the United Nations. So that's why we require UNSC. Why? United Nations was formed to give effect to security and peace, development and protect human rights. Barring this development, security and human rights front, United Nations failed, and credit goes to UNSC. Why? Versus P2 versus P3. That we all know. Even all the Secretary General, Kofi Annan, and all those, Ban Ki-moon, all they urged for the reforms which is required. But nothing has been happening at the UN because of some structural and political issues. We all know that UN Charter and all that. Now, because United Nations failed to establish security, like collective security or protection of human rights, we require reforms in the United Nations Security Council. You can mention Russia-Ukraine war, or human rights violation by various countries to justify your answer. And other stakeholders are there which are very important right now, like India, then Japan, Germany, Brazil, and of course Africa also, whole as a continent, which is not represented at the UNSC as a permanent member. Okay. So that's why we require reforms in the UNSC. That is, you can mention Ambassador Kamboj, Ruchira Kamboj, Baswati Mukherjee, Ambassador Mukherjee, you can mention Ruchira Kamboj, permanent representative at UN India's. She also urged that we require immediate reforms at UNSC. So you can mention that and conclude. Then explain, you can mention different approaches or different initiatives like G4, issue of coffee club, African Union's initiative, L69, all that. You can mention your answer. Next question. Explain the political sociological approach in the field of comparative politics and discuss its limitation. You can start with comparative politics. After comparison between states, governments, that is the field of comparative politics, and traditional approach and modern approaches. In that you can mention political sociology, though origin can be traced to Aristotle. Then come to the modern age, we have two approaches, Max Weber liberal approach and Karl Marx. You can mention that. Political sociological approach of Weber and Karl Marx. After that, you can mention under the influence of behavioralism, political sociology approach started groundwork on different areas like elections, electoral politics, political parties, voting percentage and all that. You can mention that, and it once again established the significance of comparative politics. But excessive focus on sociology started the debate. The discipline might lose its relevance. So Theda Skocpol talked about bringing the state back in. That is your conclusion. Next, do you agree with the notion that Marxist approach to the study of international relations is largely based on economic reductionism? Again, already we have discussed twice this question around same theme. Marxist approach in the field of to the study of international relations. So we can say three approaches: orthodox approach, Gramscian approach, and critical approach, critical school. So in orthodox we have Lenin and dependency school, Immanuel Wallerstein, Samir Amin, A.G. Frank. All those people you can mention. And this approach, orthodox wala approach, they excessively focused on economy. They focused on economy. And that's why it is argued that Marxist approach to the study of international relations is largely based on economic reductionism, like Immanuel Wallerstein. World systems theory based on economy only. Okay, economy is the base, or economy determines capitalism and etc. So that's why it is argued that it is purely economic reductionism. But that is not true. Largely we can say world systems theory or orthodox theory dominated the scene in the Marxist understanding of international relations, but later on we have Robert Cox, who gave neo-Gramscian perspective like hegemony in the international politics. You can mention even critical school, one-dimensional man, the Herbert Marcuse, and we have Andrew Linklater, who talked about emancipation, morality, and etc. So you can mention that. It is unjust to call ki it was purely reductionist. Okay, so you have to bring other aspect of Marxist approach to the study of international politics. Fine. Next question. What implications do feminists draw from the gendered character of nations and states? Again, this is again traditional theory of international relations or international politics and feminist theory. What implications do feminists draw from the gendered character of nations and states? Fine. So feminist versus realist debate primarily. So same debate, Morgenthau, Kenneth Walls, they established national security as territorial security. They established wars, they established balance of power, they established arms race, security maximization, power maximization, etc. And they even support wars to protect national interest. Okay, expansion, alliances, and etc. But because of that, gendered character of nation and state, this particular masculinist foreign policy or international politics laid in the context of international politics issue of women's security and women's security. They neglected this women's security. So feminists believe we should bring this aspect in the international politics rather than this masculinist foreign policy or politics of Morgenthau. So you can mention that debate only in the international politics. Next question, the world order is in flux. Multipolarity based on equitable principles is needed. This is given by Raju Bhatia, Ambassador Raju Bhatia. He has written an article in the Indian Express, and in that article he argued it is the world order is in flux, multipolarity based on equitable principle is needed. That is open secret, everyone knows that multipolarity right now, equitable principles is required. First define or understand or describe this first statement, the world order is in flux. Right now there are different issues in the world. Trade war is going on, wars are going on, geopolitics, Ukraine-Russia war, Israel-Iran war, India-Pakistan clashes, India-China clashes, ASEAN, there are different issues, Myanmar and all that. Middle East is unstable, Asia, China's rise, okay, hegemonic rise of China in Asia. So that shows that right now there is no order in the international politics. It is passing through that phase. No order is there, and right now multiple poles are there. Certainly multipolarity is there, but this multipolarity is also not just. So we require norms as proposed by India. Okay, as proposed by H. Jaishankar, India way. Okay, we require reformed multilateralism. Reformed multilateralism or just multilateralism, and as argued by Shamsaran, multipolarity based on rising say for the developing world can provide stable or stability in the world. But again, you can counter this argument with Kenneth Walls and etc. They believe, Kenneth Walls and hardcore neo-realists, they believe in the bipolarity. Multipolarity will lose, or it will not create the peace and etc. So that argument you can mention, but conclude with in support of multipolarity. You can quote Jaishankar, Shamsaran, Samir Saran, Shashi Tharoor, all those people you can quote. to justify your answer. Fine, easy. Okay, next question. So we have completed 1A. Section A we have completed. Next section, discuss the nature and types of determinants of India's foreign policy. Okay, foreign policy of any country, primary goal of any country's foreign policy is protect national interests. You can start from that. And there are different determinants, elements to protect that national interest. The country can use those determinants. Nature is India's foreign policy. So external, we have external determinants and we have internal determinants. So that is nature. External and internal. In the internal, we have domestic determinants, population, leadership, natural resources, you can mention geography, all are the determinants of foreign policy. Foreign policy is determined by all these factors, and every determinant is important to protect the national interest. You can mention all those people, like as I said, Napoleon Bonaparte and all that. Okay. Internal factors, history, economy, domestic politics, leadership, national character, culture, all those issues are there. As far as external is concerned, external world also matters for the country's foreign policy, international environment, international politics, world order, whether it is bipolarity, whether it is multipolarity, or whether it is hegemonic world order. So that is also determinant of foreign policy. Issues, global commons issues like terrorism and etc., or other issues like climate change, that also determine the country's foreign policy. So these are external and internal determinants of foreign policy. Next one is, what according to your understanding is the best option that India should take on the Indus Waters Treaty, IWT. You can start with 1960 World Bank brokered treaty between Pakistan and India in the context of sharing of rivers of Indus water system. Okay, so eastern rivers were given to India and western rivers were given to Pakistan, 80% water. That part you can mention, and maximum was given to India in the context of eastern Satluj, Ravi, Bias. Okay, Ravi, Chenab, Indus, Jhelum, these were given to the Pakistan. That is distribution you can mention. And this treaty survived major wars between India and Pakistan, 1965, 1971, 1999, Kargil war and all that. But after Pahalgam, India put that treaty on hold in abeyance. In that context, there are certain sections in the society, in the establishment, they are arguing that India should renegotiate that treaty. Many people, Sham Saran, etc., you can mention that. There are multiple options, like India can scrap, but that is not possible because within treaty that clause is not there. Unilateral exit is not possible, but yes, certain legal issues are there. Or India can renegotiate that treaty in the changing environment. So that is the best way to look into that Indus Water Treaty. Renegotiate, whatever it may be. Okay, take the certain issues, changed environment like climate change and etc., water distribution, need of water for the reason and all that, hydroelectricity, local issues and all that, and have some new treaty or new terminology in the water treaty that you can mention. Renegotiate. Next question. Write a brief note on India's interest in West Asia. West Asia, again, extended neighborhood. You can mention that. C. Raja Mohan. After South Asia or neighborhood, West Asia is the most important segment in India's foreign policy according to C. Raja Mohan. It forms the extended neighborhood. Okay. Then there are different interests of India in West Asia. Of course, first one is oil. Second one is resource remittances or diaspora. Okay, and around 40 billion remittances from this area. Third one is connectivity. Fourth one is strategic issues, for strategic issues. Fifth one is for defense sector, like Israel and etc. So historically, our policy of West Asia was based on three pillars: Iran, Israel, and Arab world. And every pole, every region, or every country, or every segment was important for India. Iran is also important according to ambassadors uh, Saran, Pankaj Saran, or Kabir Taneja. Israel, of course, is important according to Siraja Mohan. Arab world is also important, that is UAE, Saudi Arabia, for investment. Okay, sovereign fund and all that. So all these interests are there. It is up to India to walk the tightrope in this area. Maritime security and etc. You can mention that also. Fine. Next one is the India-Nepal relationship marked by shared historical, cultural, and geographical ties has been both cooperation and discord. Has seen rather both cooperation and discord. Okay, again India-Nepal. Question is asking ki their ups and downs in the relationship. That is natural. Okay, lastly cooperation, peaceful relations. Treaty of 1950, you can mention from that. In 1950s, 60s, and even 70s, pro-democracy protests in Nepal. India supported pro-democracy. Sometimes India supported monarchy, and India also supported Maoist also. So that was the India's approach towards Nepal in 1950s, 60s, 70s, depending on the interest. And that also played important role in the relationship. So Nepalis always believe that India using opportunistic policy in Nepal. India's relationship, Nepal always driven with that particular angle. You can mention SD Muni scholars, Sham Saran. Sham Saran was there as an ambassador there, okay, or High Commissioner, whatever it may be. Then ambassador, I think technically, and SD Muni, Roti Beti Ka Vyavhar and all that. You can mention those scholars. But then Nepal established its republic in 2007 around, and India accepted that or welcomed that. But in the context of new constitution in 2015, there were some concerns of India, like issue of Madhesi and federation, and India's concerns were not taken into consideration. So that blockade, 6 months blockade was there in 2015-16, and because of that, relationship once again faced challenges. Once again, relations revived, but issue of border, issue of maps once again resurfaced in 2020. Nepal on its currency added some parts of India in Kalapani area. Okay, and that once again spoiled the relations. But according to Ambassador Sood, Rakesh Sood, in the recent part, relationship is on the track, but it is very slow. That process is slow, but it is fine. Okay, that is the Nepal-India relations. You can mention scholars, as I said, all those scholars. Cooperation in various areas like tourism, people-to-people contact, culture, Buddhism, Ramayana, circuits, and all that. You can mention hydroelectricity, very important factor in the relationship. All those you can mention. I just discussed political developments. Fine. Must make phase-wise discussion here. Then next, the importance of India-Israel ties has further increased in world facing several major transformations. Okay, question is on India-Israel. Yesterday itself, I think discussed this India-Israel. Okay, 1992, direct diplomatic relations. Since then, there is strong intensity in the relationship. According to C. Raja Mohan, no other relation has intensified the way India and Israel shaped its relations in last 3 decades. Okay, so that is the transformation in the relationship. Okay, direct diplomatic relations started in 1992 and strategic partnership 2017 and etc. Why defense sector became important? Agriculture cooperation, technology cooperation. So those were the areas in the relationship. But question is asking the importance of India-Israel ties has further increased in a world facing several major transformations. That is, change geopolitics, change politics in the world. That is Russia-Ukraine war, axis of, we can say, resistance, Iran, Russia, China in the Middle East, Israel, India, USA, UAE, that is I2U2, recent initiative of India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. So that's why Israel once again became very important for India for various reasons. Defense sector, of course, connectivity, technology, and as I said, ki dehyphenation happened post 2017. So we were having clear-cut indications ki Israel stands separately in our foreign policy. We no longer recognize Israel in with connection with Palestine. So we have strong independent relations with Israel. So in changed circumstances also, Israel became very important partner for India. Okay. But other partners are also important. As I said earlier also, Iran and all those regional. India must not sacrifice other regional powers or regional actors just to have good relations with Israel. No permanent friend and no permanent enemy in the international relations. The realist must trump in the foreign policy. That is India-Israel. Fine. Next question 6a. Regional cooperation makes sense only in the event of there being at least as the bottom line a degree of ideological cohesion and economic dependence. The SAARC members have neither. Question is asking, regional cooperation makes sense only in the event of there being at least as the bottom line a degree of ideological cohesion or and economic dependence, and SAARC has none. At least ideological cohesion should be there. The democracies are there, all democracies are there, all are concerned about human rights. European Union, so we can have European Union, or at least economic dependency should be there, like ASEAN. Okay, intra-ASEAN trade is around 25%, or European Union also 60% trade. So at least one factor should be there to become successful regional bloc. You can mention European Union, you can mention ASEAN, but unfortunately SAARC has none, and that's why SAARC failed. You can mention C. Raja Mohan. It is in deadlock post 2016. No summit, no interactions among the states, and that's why regional powers or other countries or all countries are asking or looking for alternatives like BIMSTEC, BPIN, or recently even Bangladesh, China, Pakistan, Afghanistan, China. So that is the situation of SAARC. But SAARC, as I said on that day also, H.J. Shankar, Siraj, all these people, they believe SAARC required. It is not dead. It is still there. But of course, it needs to be revived and should be given some mandate to work for this South Asia. That is SAARC. Next question. Discuss the importance of India's role in UN peacekeeping operations as a ground for its claim to a permanent seat in the UN Security Council. Okay, I have shared one file, United Nations Peacekeeping Force and India. Okay, Minister of External Affairs file on India's role in UN peacekeeping forces. We all know that since its inception, 1950s, India has been regular contributor to the UN peacekeeping forces. Okay, more than 2 lakh forces we provided to the UN peacekeeping for the blue flag or blue helmet. Supreme sacrifices, 200 supreme sacrifices. All women CRPF team to the UN peacekeeping forces. That is contribution of India. India believes in the bottom-up approach in peacekeeping, capacity building approach in the peacekeeping. Track record of human rights protection is very good. Even UN peacekeepers, Indian peacekeepers at UN peacekeeping, their track record is also very good. That shows the credibility of India is there. Okay, active part in at least 50 missions out of 72 missions of UN throughout the history. That is our credibility. And based on that, India has been arguing that we should be part of UNSC. Look, we are second largest, or we can say largest country right now, unofficially, might be. We are third or fourth or fifth largest, whatever it may be, maybe fourth largest, okay. And we are democracy, largest democracy. These are our credentials, and that's why we should be part of UNSC. Okay, you can mention H.J. Shankar and all those people, Narendra Modi. You can mention that. Okay, we are no longer fence sitter. We are leading power, rising power, net security provider, and all that to establish your credentials. And UN peacekeeping forces active participation of India. That is also one credential, but that is open secret. It is very tough to reform UNSC. Even Jaishankar has accepted that we need to work hard to be part of that block. That is fine. Understood? Very easy, simple. Next question. The Indo-Russian relationship has been exceptionally steady amidst the wild oscillations in the relations between other major powers relations. Okay, so India, Russia relations. You can mention scholars, as I said, Ashok Sajjanhar, ambassador, Venkatesh Verma, DP Venkatesh Verma. That is, India's Russia relations are very strong, even during Cold War and after Cold War also. That is argument of Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar. Okay. Of course, some issues are there. In the context of oscillations in the relations between other major powers, India-Russia relations are steady. That is the argument of this particular question. Why? If you see, in the context of Russia-Ukraine war, Russia attacked Ukraine. European Union put sanctions on Russia, and USA also added some sanctions on Russia. Despite that, India continued to take oil, natural gas from Russia, and even our imports has increased manifold. I think 40% of oil comes from Russia. Trade is around 65 billion right now because of that oil. Earlier it was around $10 billion, but it increased to 65 billion. Despite this war, and even European Union accused India is funding Ukraine war. Okay, that blame we have taken. Jaishankar has accepted that. Okay, now fine. You also stop. You are taking oil from Russia and you are accusing us. No issue. That is hypocrisy. No problem. But in the context of this oscillations, there is uncertainty in the context of NATO, in the context of Trump presidency, trade war, Russia and India relation remains steady. You can mention that. But even in Russia-India relations also there are certain issues in the context of Indo-Pacific. And main issue is Russia-China angle, and that is going to be headache for India in the near future. In the context of rising friendship, cooperation between Russia and China. Both are very close right now because of changed circumstances, and that is going to be challenging for India. Point is, there are divergences in the relationship in the context of India, Russia also, but that is manageable. That is not big issue. Okay. Next question. Critically examine India's objections to the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, that is CTBT, and Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. Objections, we all know that NPT and CTBT, especially NPT 1968, 1970, okay, cutoff date 1967, 1st of January, that is discriminatory, have and have nots, horizontal proliferation, vertical proliferation, and that's why India objected this NPT. It is discriminatory. It is not just. It is not, we can say, taking into consideration other countries' issues. So that's why India has not signed this NPT, despite pressures, and even conducted nuclear test in 1974, 1998, even accepting some sanctions. Fine. Objections, of course, discriminatory. Even with CTBT also, that is the issue. Comprehensive test ban treaty and all that. India's stance is that look, there should be comprehensive variable disarmament, and that's why India supports conference on disarmament. This is the platform where India says ki we need all the nuclear disarmament or variable removal of nuclears, and that is our stance. We support this conference of disarmament. Other treaties are discriminatory, including CTBT, including NPT, and that's why India has not signed both the treaties. India is not party of this CTBT and NPT. Okay. Next, you can mention all those scholars: Anil Kapoorkar, scientist, nuclear scientist, or sorry, atomic scientist. You can mention S. Jaishankar, at that time Indira Gandhi, in the context of NPT, all that. Okay. Next question: give a critical estimate of India's role in non-alignment. Very simple, non-alignment movement now. Okay, India is founder member of this 1961 body or movement. Okay, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Panchashil doctrine played important role. Nehru and India provided leadership to the NAM. India's initiatives at NEO and etc. Anti-colonial struggle, anti-apartheid and all that. So all in those areas, India provided leadership to NAM. NAM summit happened in India, I think in 1980s, 1983. So all those years or era, India provided leadership to NAM. But in the recent past, people are saying that India has lost its interest in the NAM, especially post Cold War. Post Cold War, because NAM is in coma, according to C. Raja. And even Jaishankar argued, yesterday we discussed that statement, that NAM non-alignment policy was relevant in certain areas or in the different context in era, that is Cold War. It has no relevance technically, he was saying. So even Prime Minister Modi skipped many NAM summit, 2017, 2019, and even last NAM summit. That also he refused to join in Kampala, Uganda. Yeah, Minister of External Affairs S. Jaishankar attended that meeting, 19th NAM summit. So he skipped 17th, 18th, and 19th NAM summit. So that is again very, important fact that India, I think, or people are saying that India is losing interest in NAM because Prime Minister is not interested to go there at NAM summit. Earlier, Prime Minister of India always attended NAM summits. Last, I think in Iran, Prime Minister Dr. Singh attended that meeting. After that, Modi, all these NAM summit, he refused to join. So that shows that in the recent past, NAM has lost significance or lost relevance in the foreign policy of India. But again, we cannot abandon straight away NAM because still it is the largest bloc after the UN, 120 plus members. It is still holds the ground. It can play important role as a moral voice, as Prime Minister himself proclaimed in virtual summit post-COVID. So you can mention S. Jaishankar argued in last summit at NAM summit that NAM is here to stay and here to grow. Okay, so you can mention Jaishankar, but only issue, we are right now part of Western calculations, and in that we are part of G20, and Prime Minister has been attending G7. So Prime Minister has no time to attend the NAM because he is busy in G20 and G7. Fine. Next, domestic turmoil in neighboring South Asian countries often constitutes constitutes a strain on Indian foreign policy. Discuss with illustrations. Okay. So you can mention country wise. You can go with this. Okay. Domestic turmoil in neighboring South Asian countries often constitutes a strain on Indian foreign policy. Indian foreign policy, South Asia, we have very concrete initiatives like Gujarat Doctrine, Neighborhood First, and etc. So our vision is to have stable South Asia, prosperous South Asia, and etc. But because of certain issues in South Asian countries, Indian foreign policy always faced certain issues. And in the recent past, domestic issues in neighboring South Asian countries challenged India's calculation in the region. Like you can mention Bangladesh in the recent past. That is the main. The context is that only. Bangladesh. Uh, of course, Sheikh Hasina government provided cooperation to India, and we were having good relations. But according to scholars like C. Raja, we neglected other political parties like BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party. We put all our eggs in one basket, that is Awami League, and right now we are paying price of that particular miscalculation. Or people are saying that we should focus on bipartisan support in neighbor or in neighboring countries, because their domestic politics anytime there will be change. Same happened with Maldives also. If you remember, Mohammad Nasheed was removed by military coup in 2000, I think 12, and we were having good relations. After that, a pro-China regime came in Maldives, and we witnessed some tense relations in Maldives, India-Maldives relations also. And that is domestic politics, pro-China, pro-India. In Sri Lanka also, during Mahinda Rajapaksa's regime, Rajapaksa brothers were having good relations with China, and Rajapaksa played China card. And again, we were having some issues with Sri Lanka, security issues and all that. Even with Nepal also, domestic politics played important role. Issue of Madeshis and all that. OP Sharma Kohli, Prachanda Dahal, pro-China again, pro-India, Bhattacharya and all that. You can mention Nepal also. Barring Bhutan, even Bhutan also right now there is issue, pro-democracy and all that, pro-China. But barring Bhutan in everywhere, of course Pakistan always there, but other regional powers or regional countries like Maldives, Nepal, Bangladesh, their domestic issues impacted our foreign policy choices. That is, you have to mention what is required, mature foreign policy, not to take sides, maintain bipartisan support. Understood? 8A, comprehensively examine the major developments, trends in Indo-US relations since the early 2000s. Comprehensively examine the major developments, trends in Indo-US relations. Okay, from 2000. Indo-US relations since 2000s or early 2000s. Okay, you can have that post 1998 sanctions on India. Dennis Cox argued that for long India-US remained estranged democracies. Even most important, post 1998, USA put restrictions or sanctions on India, and because of that relations were having some issues. But Vajpayee's visit to US in 1999 once again re-established the relationship. Then Clinton visited in 2000, and there we declared our relationship as natural alliance and all that. And we have Jaswant Singh and Strobe discussions on the issue of nuclear cooperation, and we had that nuclear deal in 2007, 2005, 2008. Because of George Bush, Condoleezza Rice, and Manmohan Singh, we were having that 2008 nuclear deal. nuclear deal. Fine. After that, Obama came. Obama also visited India in 2010 state visit, where he described India-US relation as defining moment or defining feature of 21st century. Then Trump came. Trump also in the first presidency we were having good relations. Trump visited India, Modi visited USA, howdy Modi and all that. Point is we were having four foundational agreements in defense sector, major defense partners, strategic trade authorization one. All those happened during Trump first presidency. Then Biden, Joe Biden, and during Biden also that Quad and all that continued. We became part of that Indo-Pacific supply chain mechanism and all that. Biden also maintained good relations with India, but this Trump 2.0 has challenged this relationship in the context of trade war and tariff. So that is the history of India-US relations from 2000 to 2025. Scholars, you can mention scholars like, as I said, Dennis Cox. Then you can mention Barack Obama. You can mention Ashley Talis. You can mention Nirupama Rao. You can mention H. Jaishankar, Navtesh Sarna. All those scholars. Mention those their views, ki India-US relationship and all that. All those people you can mention in the relationship. Understood? Fine. Comprehensively examine the major developments trends in the US relationship. So again, divergences and convergences are there in the relationship. Both aspects you have to discuss in the relationship. 8B, discuss the efficacy of India's no first use policy, nuclear weapons, in the context of the evolving strategic challenges from its neighbors. No first use policy, okay, nuclear test, the nuclear doctrines, K. Subramanian, doyen of Indian strategic calculations, we had that nuclear doctrine. No first use, credible, minimum deterrence, then political control, okay, non-use against non-nuclear weapon states and all, etc. And the most important feature is no first use. No first use doctrine. Now, in the context of rising tensions in the region, especially from Pakistan and China, Doklam and all that, Galwan, Pakistan, Pulwama, then recent Pahalgam, there is debate that we should change our foreign nuclear doctrine from no first to first use. Okay, this can be understood. This can be addressed in both aspects. There are some positives. There are also negatives. Okay. So those who are saying that you should change this no first to first use, like Bharat Karnad, he argues that India should discard this first use policy, no first use policy, and target China and deliver the message these nuclears are for the China, because China is going to major threat for India. So he supports this no first to first use policy in the nuclear doctrine. But there are people who believe that no first use serves the purpose. Why? It gives responsible message of responsible actor in the world. Responsible actor in the world. It maintains strategic ambiguity, as mentioned by Shyam Saran and Ambassador Nirupama Rao. So India should continue with this no first use, and to convert it into first use, we require strategic alignments also in the defense sector. Okay, so that is going to be very huge task. So rather than that, focus on conventional weapons, maintain strategic autonomy, strategic ambiguity, and it will give responsible actors message in the world. India aspires to be part of UNSC leader and etc. So India should behave responsibly. Though Pakistan has its own calculations, but India should not be part of that calculations. Rather, India should maintain its own foreign policy, strategic calculations, and maintain that ambiguity. That will serve the purpose. So you can conclude with that, Nirupama Rao or Shyam Saran. Fine. Critically examine the role of India in shaping the emerging world order. Okay, distribution of power, that is world order, and it has been defined, or it has been different phases. Okay, bipolar world orders, multipolar world order, and hegemonic world order. Right now we are in the multipolarity. And question is asking critically examine role of India in shaping emerging world order. So right now, yes, just we discussed ki it is in flux. Right now that is very fluid, very dynamic, and we require just multipolarity. And in that India can play important role. Right now, the global governance is controlled by the West, like IMF, World Bank, United Nations. India can play important role to reform those, like IMF, World Bank, UN. India can be part of global South to put issues in the international politics like climate justice, food security, okay, fishery sector at WTO, to give special and differential treatment to protect that principle, multilateralism at WTO. So India can shape that also. India can play an important role as a responsible state actor in the international politics by because of its virtue, that is our civilization, our democracy, our human rights, and all those. So in that way certainly India can play an important role. You can mention scholars like Sham Saran, okay, Samir Saran, Shashi Tharoor, Pax Indica, okay, Sham Saran, okay, that is India is not that of China. China's ambitions are different, India's ambitions are different. Jambu Dupa, that is Sham Saran's analysis of India's ambitions. So he also believes that multipolarity is good and India should play important role to reform that multipolarity. Jay Shankar, India's ways, and etc. You can mention. So in that way, India can play an important role in the global governance and shaping world order. Okay, so we have completed all the 6 tests. Please be confident, hold the ground, and face the exam with confidence. Okay, so if you face any kind of difficulty, please message me. We'll work on that. We'll reply. But be confident. Okay, wish you all the best for the mains 2025. Please take care. Thank you for joining this session.